Hello, and welcome back to Hermetic Link. My name is Joyous,
And I'm Silas.
and today we're going to be talking about the themes and the traits that are attributed to Saturn and how it represents destruction, time, transmutation, and the transcendence of cycles in Hermeticism and other traditions. So, we're also going to be talking about the duality between Saturn and Christ consciousness, uh, aka the material and the spiritual views in the universe. In Hermeticism, this would be known as the hylic versus the pneumatic energies. But then there's also the psychic that make up the whole.
Yeah. And to start off, when we're talking about Saturn, um, the struggles that come with Saturn and the energies that we're trying to describe are kind of all encompassing and very hard to pin down with vocabulary. At least we're considering it to be like that. So we'll try to slow down and put these in put these in as close to grounded terms as we can, without being too overwhelming with the jargon and the specific terms that we might otherwise use. Otherwise, this would take all night, and this would probably be very incoherent to listen to.
Right. You know, it is odd to talk about Saturn because in Hermeticism this would be Saturn is the black sun. It's also known as the occulted knowledge, some kind of subtle and condensed wisdom or pattern that we can pick up on that occur in our everyday life, just everywhere, and in nature.
You were talking about the limit of the material, and when I hear Saturn, I hear the word limit attributed to that as more often than not.
Oh,
So
of
Saturn
course,
is
because
Yeah, Saturn
Saturn,
deals in limitations.
yeah, he is the limit. And whenever I say he, I mean in the pagan perspective of things, Saturn is supposed to be equated to uh, Kronos and Thanatos, time and death, god of the underworld. And he has his own mythology and stories that surround him too, that deal in limits and necessity,
I
especially
think they
when it comes
feared
to
these.
Thanatos. But yeah,
Yeah, I think that when they wrote these mythologies, or when they at least passed them down, they tended to fear these entities, because you had your intimidating gods, and you had your deities that were a little bit capricious, but there were very few that were just actually seen as absolute forces of nature. Um, the same way that Kronos or Saturn would have been to the people who were paying homage and genuinely worshiping these things.
and you know, whenever I think about it now, Thanatos would probably be, in our list anyway, the best, or like I would, maybe not the best, but the lightest representation of death in the underworld because he's supposed to be known as like a handsome angel who
So they
gets,
saw him as like a little bit more benevolent.
yeah, it's like he was just doing a job, right?
Mm.
He was just taking uh, the souls that die on this earth over into the afterlife or the underworld, how they put it.
Well, that's interesting to me, because that sounds like a civilization that was a lot more at peace with the limitations that they had, and they were a lot more on speaking terms with it, so to speak.
Well, yeah, the elders definitely had their rites and rituals that they followed to their T's. But whenever it comes to Saturn and Thanatos, they kind of go around each other. I really enjoy how Saturn is known for its rings because the Ophanim angels the wheels of God's chariot, the thing that's supposed to have wheels within wheels in it, is also has its like resemblance to Saturn. There's not like a correspondence there, but I just think it looks cool.
There might have been. Was there a reason to believe that when they were looking up at Saturn, they were able to see the rings? I mean, I'm pretty sure that they were. They had the technology to do that, right? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
This is one of the things I'm not very sure about. You know, I was also going to talk about the northern pole of Saturn being a black hexagon.
Mm.
And there's a lot of correspondences there with this uh, black hexagon. But
We can talk about that when we get into like what it means for us in modern day. Well, before we get ahead of ourselves, we're talking about. Did you have anything to say about the Aristotelian model or the planets in other models?
well, whenever we're talking about Saturn as the gatekeeper or necessity or the planet that's on the edge, on the end of all the cycles, I would like to bring up the Aristotelian model of the universe. It's not a literal model, mind you, but it's supposed to be a symbolic model of the soul. So the different planets will represent different aspects of your soul. That includes the sun and the moon and the earth. So, well, let's talk about the implications that this black hexagon pole has for Saturn. You had some interesting thoughts about Saturn and the color black, didn't you?
I did, and I have a page that I wrote down just because this is something that could go on very long. But I just wanted to say something succinct and get it out of the way without, disrespecting the time that I have too much because this is a few paragraphs, but I'll go ahead and go through with it. But I have a page labeled Saturn and the color black. Saturn is associated with the color black, which commonly is assigned to be the color of central relics in ritualistic practice, such as robes, garments, and even the altar in high magic. Hang on, my cat.
Mm. So the reason why black is representing all of these things in Hermetics is usually because black represents the full spectrum in one color. It's supposed to represent
Right.
power.
I'm trying to record this, and my cat starts yelling across the house. The altar is in high magic ritualistic practice is supposed to be a black cube, and we'll get into that. The color black is the most absorbent shade of the visible light spectrum. Realistically, a pure pitch black is impossible to create in the physical world. What you are viewing when you see a shade of black is actually an offset hue of another color. All colors in the spectrum are combined to create this shade. One could say that this shade is the most colorful and full representation of the light spectrum. The energy of Saturn is that of reinforcement. The physicality of the human condition means that it is impossible to become truly pure. And this is the mythological struggle of humanity which they have battled with throughout time, and it is the central conflict which they speak about in their fables. The fruitless effort of endeavoring to become perfect in a reality which binds them to be inherently imperfect. All humans are invariably subject to the laws of their reality, without exception. So then comes the dilemma of what it means to live in such a land where one cannot be pure as is the law of the land. If we think of the influence of Saturn as the physicality of our daily lives, it is what we feed in the present which becomes the future. In the body, it is the quality of the food we eat which becomes our body and our fuel. It is the thoughts which become biases later. Then it is the actions which become habit. The habits then become our nature. Nothing exists in the present which was not first seated in the past, and nothing will come to be which will not first have a form in thought. Addiction is a prime demonstration of how Saturn will seem bipolar because it deals in both the subtleties of choice and the extremities of consequence. The effects of our choices can only be revealed through the unfolding of time. A harmful action which begins as a small habit eventually becomes an inescapable routine and a debt which demands to be paid. The choice from this moment is this: one can continue to abate the habit or suffer the severity of the addiction's laborious healing process. Consequence is almost never as sudden or unfair as it may initially seem. Temporary benefits or results can be gained in the present by borrowing from the future self, or perhaps passing that price on to somebody else. However, without the wisdom and the foresight to understand how attempting to skip directly to results will be in violation of the physical laws which we are unavoidably beholden to, disaster surely awaits. The inverse must also be true, then, that choosing to sow beneficial seeds of habit and thought in the present will give the future self the tools and the power to master their own fate. All that is required is the wisdom and the willpower to pay the initial price which will yield the desired outcome. However, to truly gain this mastery of life, the effort must be constant and disciplined. The foundations we give ourselves must be constantly reinforced.
Right. So toward the end, there's this duality between you can either choose the toll of discipline or the toll of regret, and whatever's in your mind, whatever's in your thoughts, is going to influence what your bias is, which you could say crystallizes into habits and later on into addictions that you have to uh, grow and burst out of.
You know, now that I think about it, I think this is where, like, if you read in history and even in like modern iterations of Saturn worship, it's all about sacrificing the past to benefit the future, which is kind of what I was getting at, was skipping directly to the result. But there's a confusion there because Saturn never promises that it's going to be easy no matter which path that you take. It's inherently going to be hard. But I think where the holdup lies with these people who think that it's like buying something. You're simply purchasing a future that you want. It's not like that at all. It's in fact, that's one of the most disastrous things. That's one of the most disastrous interpretations that you could probably have.
So whenever we're talking about habits, addictions, and thoughts that we have on this world, uh, Saturn is usually supposed to also represent the earthly decisions that we make uh, ritually every day, our daily morning rituals. We even call them our nightly rituals. This is all Saturn's realm. Whatever it is you're doing, however you're behaving, whether you're uh, doing drugs or reading scripture, it doesn't really matter. Saturn's going to count that essentially in his like record for you because he keeps count. He's essentially the symbol of the body that keeps count. I'm sure a lot of you heard the phrase "the body keeps count." Well, that's I don't want to say that's where that comes from, but it comes into play into into stuff like this anyway.
Time definitely keeps count. Yeah. So tell me if I'm getting ahead of myself, but I wanted to talk about the black cube that we were trying to mention in in a
Yeah, we,
sensitive
we
way.
mentioned we mentioned the black hexagon, northern pole of Saturn, for a second, and this has major implications across all religions. Like this has a very big impact on all traditions because it is essentially different. I mean, this happens in different ways, different forms across the world, but it all comes down to money, control money and control over the flesh.
and it's bled into every tradition and culture too. Every culture has their version of this. It's kind of like what I was saying when I said that there are people out there who think that they can buy the future.
Yeah, I think they can buy time or placate death whenever they're talking about like deals with the devil or, give me another year. Uh, it's like celebrities and stuff like that. These kind of ideas reference back to celebrities and movies and songs and stuff being influenced by lodges and cults that are also influenced by the worship of Saturn, which is the worship uh, almost of their own fortune, of their own money, their own legacy on this earth.
Yeah, and that's
Jesus
what.
would have referred to men like these, groups like these, as the synagogue of Satan.
And they definitely still exist out there, and that's that's an entire rabbit hole, which I don't think that we need to get into. But the point is there's, or we can, but there's a way to misinterpret this that really doesn't come out well for either party. And what this has to do with us is, in a lot of ways, we do this too. We do a lot of bargaining in our lives where we think that we can buy something that we can't. Um, and we get confused as to how the reaping and sowing of the outcomes that we want actually works.
In Freemasonry, there is a pattern. There's a just checkered floor pattern, and this will be up on the screen.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
really cool image.
and what it's supposed to be, what this is all supposed to be representing, is the Freemasonic version of duality, of light and dark. Light being the knowledge of God, the knowledge of what we're doing, and dark being the ignorance that we're all born into, that we have to grow out of. You can almost say that Saturn kind of rules that ignorant sphere. But there's also a pillar in the middle of it all that joins the opposites, and what we would refer to this in Hermeticism and magical circles as the middle pillar, and this represents our soul's connection to God. And there's a lot of different versions of our, like, the soul's energy centers, like the chakra system, but at the end of the day, it's it's all representing the same duality of opposites that we have on this world.
Hmm. And generally, it has to do with it all. The energy goes down the spine. That much seems to be universal. Um,
But this is even agreed upon in physical sciences when we're talking about the vagus nerve stimulation. You
oh
breathe
yeah.
deeply, in like a cyclical kind of way, and like you get relaxed into this like meditative trance, and like you really feel something in your brain and down your neck and spine, and that's the vagus nerve system.
Oh yeah. One of the most direct ways to hit this, for anybody watching, just listen to those like Tibetan singing bowls. There's probably going to be some guy or some girl who is like hitting these bowls. Just sit down, don't do anything. Just listen to that and feel where it vibrates. I swear, like go into it with an open mind. That gets me every time.
Yeah, and you can listen to like ambient tracks that just have one sustained tone to them for each energy for each energy system that we're referring to. There's like a tone
Hmm.
that goes from the lowest grounding energy to the highest most knowledgeable energy.
Yeah,
So
matching
that is
chakras.
yes, that is good to work with.
Absolutely. You'll literally feel it in that part of your body. It's very interesting. Um,
Oh yeah, whenever they say to like breathe into certain like energy chakras or like parts of your body, like you can feel that happening.
Oh yeah, it's a difference. Like professional vocalists are taught to breathe like from their stomach or from their or into their chest and into their throat, to push out different kinds of vibrations, which will naturally create another note that's associated with that part of their body. Um, anybody who sings or does vocals will know what I'm talking about, but that's the same resonance. That's the same resonance that we're talking about.
So sometimes, and this is just something I wanted to go over. Sometimes in magic, people are trying to seek some inane shit like immortality. They're trying to become like invulnerable to like the tides of life in the universe. And well, it should go without saying, but I'll just drop this anyway. There's an ancient Greek story, I believe it's Greek, where it's a story of Thanatos being chained by the king Sisyphus. And the major point was whenever Sisyphus actually was clever enough to trick Death into chaining himself, because that's what happened, he runs off and tries to do his own thing. And Ares, the god of war, is the first one to recognize that no one is dying anymore. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. The god of war would kind of know no one is dying anymore. So he goes and he looks for Death, can't find him, and then he finds him chained up and he's got to free him. Something along those lines.
Keep my wars going, boy.
But the major point to all of that is the necessity that time and decay have. Uh, the necessity that even challenging the cosmic order and acknowledging the burdens of life have, too.
Yeah, and there was something that I wanted to touch on a more personal note. When we talk about this stuff, everybody's got their habits, and everybody's got their problems. I hope not that anyone thinks this about us, but when we talk about this, good habits versus bad habits, some of my favorite speakers have very interesting lives who have educated me a lot through these things, and so we're not a couple of wise guys talking about this
Yes, we are.
and knowing any better. Um, but like everybody has, like, for example, I still smoke pretty often. That's one of my Saturnian issues. I had a few periods in my life where I was just drinking too much, and it could happen again if I don't keep a careful watch on that. Just very physical, very unavoidable things where I had thought that I was immune from some kind of consequence, but then figured out slowly over time that that was not the case, and then I realized it was unavoidable,
Yeah,
and that
through
nobody.
your addictions, you have to know your limits. It's one of the only ways that you'll be able to know your limits. Sometimes, I
For the
mean,
most part.
Saturn is the type of energy that gives you a good backhand across the face for you to understand what your limits are. You'll have some
Yeah.
health scare, your heart will give out, or you'll have like some organ failure, or you'll go to the doctor and have some sort of cancer, and that'll be your sign. That'll be your backhand from Saturn.
And yeah, nobody, for the most part, generally, nobody falls into these patterns or these cycles or these events because they're weak. They they are just bound to the same laws that everybody else is, and to an
Yeah, and they
extent,
just kind
it's a
of
luck of the
accept it
draw.
as life.
Yeah, it's the luck of the draw, and it's just what their habits and their choices added up to, and that's Saturnian consequence there. Most people do not think twice about it. It's
Well,
just what it is.
most people don't think twice about it because it's literally they're blind to it. It's like Saturn is hidden to them. They just don't understand the nature of their own addiction because they haven't come to their own revelation. I'm not saying about of Saturn, but just of addiction itself that they have to get over they have like a tribulation, a trial that they're facing. It doesn't matter who it's administered by, who they think it is administered by, but there's something that they're facing.
Yeah, everybody has their trials, and I think for people who choose, like, if you're interested in Hermeticism, obviously, um, and you just watch it for the information, cool, you can learn something about that too, or you can learn about this. But for people who choose Hermeticism as a path, or as a personal guide for their own life, they shouldn't be discouraged because they hit obstacles, and they shouldn't be ashamed because things like this can happen to them. Um,
Yeah, Christ wasn't a Christian. The Buddha wasn't a Buddhist.
and I would say, to a certain extent, if you expose yourself to directly acknowledging every facet of what makes you human, which is what you're doing when you do magic or when you explore Hermeticism, you end up in situations more often where you have to directly face it. And it might hit you a little bit harder than it hits other people. But everyone's got their trials.
Yeah, and there are people, there were definitely people in the later period, older periods that did not want to either face their trials like head on or wanted to face it with a overbearing kind of ideology. And what I'm talking about here is Christianity. Whenever zealous Christians would think of their own addictions or the things that ail them on this world, or other tribes that might follow slightly different religions, or maybe their own religion that's just like different from the other one. I mean, you know how it is. They will view the earthly energy that's known as Saturn and habits and addiction. They won't, well, since they won't view it, it'll be hidden to them because it's hidden knowledge. They'll just demonize it and make it their enemy. I mean, Satan is literally translated to the adversary.
It sounds a lot like Saturn, too.
And it just sounds like Saturn too, yeah.
It's just, yeah, that's a pattern I can't ignore. um, so you wanted to, I see that you wanted to talk about this, the Christian perspective. And there's a quote here that I kind of want you to explain, a couple here that are basically the same phrase. The last shall be the first, and I am the Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, these verses are especially interesting from a Hermetic alchemical perspective because the last shall be the first, and I am the Alpha and the Omega refers to an inverting of the cycles, and it's Christ saying that he's essentially coming to liberate all of humanity from the worldly ways, and they will all come to Christ. They will all come to the celestial mindset instead of the material Saturnic mindset that usually corresponds with the tempting that comes with Satan.
Yeah, you could say he was trying to hand over the keys to heaven to anybody that would just take them.
Oh yeah, Christ says, "I am the living one. I died. But behold, I am alive forevermore. I hold the keys of death and Hades." So what he's saying is he's claiming an end to the satanic cycles, and this can be known as transmutation in magic and Hermeticism. What Christ is doing is taking the satanic physical matter of this world, and he's transmuting it into a more Christly or divine substance that is like gold. He's transmuting lead to gold, and there are other metals in between those five other metals in between that correspond with the other planets and the Aristotelian model that we were talking about earlier. That all lines up when it comes to the when it comes to the ancient interpretations of all these ideas and the planets.
There it is, lead to gold. The transmutations were mentioned.
And it also says in the Bible, in Job 38, who gives to the frost from the heavens when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the
Mm,
bear with its cubs? Do you
yes.
know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over earth?
Yes. Oh, yes, that's so cool because that was going to be something that I was going to mention because practicing magic, the general one way to word the goal, and this passage in Job is actually describing exactly that. Our goal when we're doing these practices and we're trying to refine the self like that, um, transmuting ourselves and then transmuting the world after that. The phrase that you're supposed to hold on to as the goal is it said that magic is the process of breaking the chains which bind your soul to the stars, which means you right now are beholden to this world, its physicality, its laws, and when the stars shift and influence the world and the people and your behaviors, you have to go beyond those um, things that are outside of your control and get control of yourself enough to become immune rather than being swayed side to side by all these different natural influences.
Right,
It's
you have
not
to.
really about them being evil, it's about
Mm,
having your own absolute agency.
you have to transcend. You have to transcend yourself and your own addictions and habits before you can transcend the rest of the world. Before you can transmute the rest of the world. This would be known as the path of the Bodhisattva in Buddhism, coming back from nirvana to liberate the rest of the world, which is bound in chains.
The Bodhisattva also seems to think that this is fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it gets a sort of pleasure out of it. But I also wanted to read another part of the Bible that goes into the duality between celestial consciousness and material consciousness. This is Romans chapter 8, verse 6. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. You, however, are not in the realm of the flesh, but are in the realm of the Spirit. If indeed the Spirit of God lives in you, and if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, they do not belong to Christ. But if Christ is in you, then even though your body is subject to death because of sin, the Spirit gives life because of righteousness. And if the Spirit of Him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, He who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of His Spirit who lives in you.
So I have a question, and I guess this is me kind of wanting to know um, about your beliefs, but you said this a few times, and I want to know: do you refer to Christ as the person, or do you think that referring to the Christ as a noun is referring to something else?
Well, I believe Christ was real, um, but I also believe in magical Hermetic circles that, I mean, I would prefer to use the Christ, or as it is a noun, because Christ is supposed to translate over to the Savior, Jesus the Savior. So whenever you're thinking about Christianity or the Bible or Jesus in Hermeticism, it's all very important because Christ represents the archetypal magician. The Savior is supposed to come back from his ivory tower, like the Bodhisattva coming back from Nirvana. He's supposed to come back from heaven and liberate the world from its chains, that's from its chains of Saturn, you know, from the addictions and the sin that we live in and die in daily. So that's what I believe whenever it comes to Christ and magic in that process.
It almost sounds like you think that there's a little bit of Christ in everyone, just
Oh, of
waiting to be
course.
pulled out.
There's I believe, well, there's obviously the concept of a chosen people, and different religions, think differently of this, that they might be or might not be the chosen people. But I believe, personally anyway, that if you are alive, that if you're aware to these energies on any sort of scale, then you are being called and may have even been chosen by God. There's a sliver, is a small piece of God, or that gold that can be or that lead that can be transmuted into gold within all souls.
When people say that, this seems like a blasphemous thing to like say if you're in the traditional Christian
Mm.
circles. But my argument for that is, if it makes you cringe to think that you can't be God, you can't have God in you, God made you and then walked away, I would argue it's impossible for God to not be inside of you. It's not possible for an entity like God, which is all encompassing, to not be a part of your very physicality. There's a quote, and I actually got this from a show called Attack on Titan, but the
Mm.
quote stuck with me. The quote just stuck with me. They said one of the characters said such a lovely thing, and he was they were talking about God, and he said, "We exist because we are wanted. Everybody exists because they are wanted, no matter how different they look or where they come from. They exist because they were made deliberately, and that it was intended to be that way."
That's almost like Christ defending the adulterous woman, saving her, saying, "He who shall, or he who cast the, he who is without sin shall cast the first stone." That's what he said in that story. And what that was supposed to represent, that woman was supposed to have gone to Christ. That woman was representing lead, and Christ came and defended her and saved her and turned her into gold. Or this can also be in the Bible. This is also symbolically represented as the initiated and the uninitiated, or water into wine, where wine is obviously the initiated, and people who understand the esoteric teachings. Uh, Interestingly enough, Judas was one of these.
Mm, interesting. We had to talk about that on another episode, actually.
Yeah, I think Judas might have to get his own episode, honestly. Judas, or like the trickster energy gods, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, giving you some ideas already.
Yeah, right. We're gonna. Yeah, because you just said something that's new to me. That's pretty cool. You said a lot of things that were new to me, honestly, in this episode. While we were recording, we talked about this like a few times, and yeah, there's still some stuff that I learned while
Hey
we
man,
were
I try to keep it fresh. Try to keep you on your toes, man.
recording. Resist Saturn's rage bait.
All right. I've always found this kind of duality interesting, how Satan is represented as a goat, and in the story of Abraham, the goat is manifested almost by God to be slaughtered in place of Abraham's son Isaac. So there's like a form of satanic martyrdom, you would almost say. And then, and that's obviously in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, obviously Christ's crucifixion comes around, it almost like encapsulates the story of both a Christ and a Satan, or like material version, a kind of energy being sacrificed in the name of God in the form of a conflict.
Hmm. I think there's something to be said about that. I think that you really, like, somebody's really got to correct me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm not about to misinterpret the Quran. But I think that there was something that one of their scholars said that said political extremists or religious extremists who go into conflict knowingly do not join them because they are the fuel which will feed the fire, which will ultimately uh, bring the which will ultimately uh, bring God back in some way. But I'm absolutely butchering that. I only recall that there's an element of religious extremism, as in armed extremism, which is acknowledged by the religions they come from as being the sacrifice.
Well, Jesus said to Judas in the Gospel of Judas, "You will be the man who sacrificed the man who clothes me." Something like that. Your role is essentially to strip me of my worldly form so I can go meet with my Father. And if you actually take in what he's saying there is he's choosing Judas to convert his lead to gold. And there's something deeply poetic about that that I can't even fully explain.
Judas gets his own episode. It's settled.
Gets his own episode. But it is written, even in the Bible, uh, for your sake, we face death all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Every day, when we go to sleep, we face death. We face down something that we're on the edge of that we don't, many of us, the vast majority, have no idea what's just around the corner when they're going to sleep at night. But it's supposed to be like that because if people knew about Saturn, what he represented, they would go crazy. Like society would fall apart. There's a necessity for him to be hidden.
Yeah, I think that they do. If you, the term satanic panic was coined,
Mm.
I think that people are aware of it and they do go crazy over it. Thinking about something so
Well, the witch burnings.
hostile, yeah. Thinking of something so hostile existing on the same earth as them just drives them nuts. And, you know, who's to say that's not an understandable crash out?
Hmm. Bro said valid crash out to the Puritans. Interesting.
No, wait, not really.
Not really.
let me let me rethink
Double
that.
back.
Forget I said anything actually.
We'll cut that out. We'll cut that out.
uh, it is interesting though, how acknowledging Saturn has a way of really getting in your head.
Yeah, and he gets in your head in a way that doesn't leave. Almost like I don't know if you've heard about this Chinese water torture method
Hmm.
where they strap you down and they would just give you like they would just let water drip on your forehead
Yeah,
forever.
rage
Chinese
bait.
water torture, rage bait. Yes.
Chinese water rage bait. Um, yeah, that makes absolute sense because both Satan and Saturn, in their respective contexts, cultures, which is pretty much one and the same, you can consider it, plays a very long game with a human life, and it goes in cycles of roughly 27 years, which is around, as astrologically speaking, the cycles run 27 years, which is how long it takes Saturn to make a full revolution around the sun compared to us on Earth. Um,
Yeah, and apparently that's whenever around that age is whenever major changes are supposed to be occurring in your life. Anyway.
It's called a Saturn return, and you go through more than one. You go through one when you're 27. You go through one when you're 54. You'll go through another one when you're, am I doing the right math right? 71. If you're very, very lucky, you'll go through another one when you're 98.
That's even if you want to get that lucky.
Um, but that's part of what I'm talking about is these Saturn returns and these astrological influences. That's part of the chains which bind the soul to the stars. That's one of the things that you shouldn't, if you want to be healthy, you shouldn't be beholden to, or you at least should be steady enough to not be shaken by them.
Right. Well, I wanted to talk about, well, obviously we got a lot of stuff to talk about, but what, I guess I'll just ask you, what is your understanding of the Great Abyss?
Um, it makes me think of that quote where when you stare into the abyss stares back. And the example of what this has to do with a person that comes to mind is I think human life is enriched by being around others and by collecting perspectives. And there's an entire inner world that you have to explore in yourself for the sake of self improvement. But I think on the other end of that, there's an extreme where you start staring into the abyss um, that is your own soul because it's a very vast thing. And when somebody's life starts becoming entirely within their own inner world, and there is nothing grounding them to the earthly reality, because that is important. You have to have a routine in the world that you live in. You have to participate. You're not just here to be by yourself. You have to go and serve others. And if you don't, the isolation is enough to suck you into a sort of abyss. I also think that it's describing a very, very specific kind of spiritual matter, which some people have experienced, where it is the absolute absence of matter and it is the absolute absence of anything. This is where Kronos is imprisoned. It is Tartarus. It is um, the absence of anything that Saturn can eat. Saturn sits still if it cannot eat anything. If there is no time, if there is no life, if there is no matter, there's nothing for Saturn to do. But that is an entirely different phenomenon.
I don't think I've actually mentioned this god very much, but he's been on my mind a lot recently. Um, it's an Eastern manifestation of cycles and destruction, death. His name is Mahakala, if I'm saying that right. Um,
Did you just summon him?
I may have. The episode will just end if I did. But this guy's supposed to be the.
I was kind of waiting on that to happen.
He's supposed to be one of the protectors of the Dharma, or the duty. Whatever your life's duty is supposed to be, he's supposed to protect that through taking all of your. And he looks like a very bad, like satanic, negative uh, entity, God. But what he's really doing is he's consuming all of the negativity and trauma and things like that out from your life so you can almost have the room to live your life. He's like trying to give you the space by eating away at your negativity.
Yeah, that makes me think of the phrase "time heals all wounds." You can use time to your advantage if you play a long game with yourself. If you sit through any negativity that you might be feeling, if you play your cards right, eventually the god of time eats that too.
You know, and whenever we're talking while we're talking about Saturn eating things.
Show it on the screen. Pull it up.
Pull it up. Jarvis, show me Saturn eating his own children.
Yes. Oh, the history behind that painting is so interesting. Do you know it?
It sounds like you would give a better explanation than I would.
Sun
I
painting.
think it
Saturn
was
eating a sun.
I think it was from a guy who was going crazy in his house or something.
Yes. So that painting is not the artist's name is Francisco Goya, and he lived in 1823. Well, he died, and they found it in 1823. But this painting wasn't actually given a title. Saturn devouring his son was actually the name that was given to this painting after it was found, but it was painted on his walls, and they found it after they found his body in his house.
Mm.
Yeah.
After he
So
died. Damn.
there's a lot of energy behind that painting.
And it
Lots
is
of
a very
messages.
intense painting too. Like I think I'm pretty sure we can show that on YouTube. But
Yeah, other
it's still
people have done it
tense.
before. Those AI slop channels have put their thing on there before. We
Yeah,
can do
yeah, we can do
it.
that. But what Saturn is doing here, he's not just being an evil shit. He's digesting your immaturity with a child in you. He's what he's. There's a couple other images of Saturn where he's got a scythe in his hand and a baby in his hand. He's got like both of them. It represents life and death, the duality with Saturn.
Mm, mm.
And there's also another painting called Father Time, clipping Cupid's wings, I think. And it's him taking the scythe to Cupid and his wings. And what he's doing is he's pretty much throwing all the fallen angels. Oh, he's the one who's throwing all the fallen angels onto the earth. And
Mm.
in this context, we would be all of the like humanity would be all the fallen angels. He's taken all of our wings and told us he threw us into an ocean and said, "Swim, bitch."
Give me my wings. Give me my wings.
The Tool song, yeah, it's a great song.
Fantastic. Yeah, we listen to a lot of Tool here,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's
it's
very interesting
essential,
because
essential listening.
if you want to get enlightened, listen to it.
You know,
Um,
that's actually where they say the name Tool. They came up with the name Tool to like for it to be a tool to enlightenment or awakening. That's what they said.
I was wondering. That kind of clicked before we started this episode.
Really?
Because I was looking at him like Tool. Oh, I get it.
A
And
tool, yeah.
I just now figured, I just now
Yo, you
figured that
just
out before we
intuitively
started.
came to that.
Yeah, like just now. That's really interesting that they said that actually.
But
We got
yes, Saturn digests you in this world because you could pretty much see you as a soul being digested through the earthly realm of Saturn, which is uh, ruled by those that worship him the most through money and reverence. And there are whole Masonic lodges and multinational corporations that give their credence to Saturn. So if you think that Satan or the Saturn worship stuff is just like reserved for conspiracy theory, like schizo posting guys, nah, nah, this is like baked into our whole society and way of life and multinational corporations. You can see it in their logo design. You can see the sigils of Saturn.
Yeah, they actually build black cubes in cities.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
Ground Zero from 9/11. They're black cubes.
really.
Yeah.
Wow.
You didn't know that?
I guess I just didn't run into it. I just knew that it was outside of corporate offices. I didn't know that they
Oh no.
memorialized a
If
place
you
of
look
death
up
with that.
if you look up the 9/11 memorial, you'll find like a black cube at the center.
The source, can you pull that up?
Jarvis, pull up the 9/11 memorial.
9/11 cube. I'm just getting Rubik's cubes when I look this up. Hang on. Memorial. I
It might be,
see.
yeah, it might be like a waterfall with like two
Yeah, I
cubes,
see
something like
dug
that.
in.
It's yeah, it's supposed to be like not the full shape, so it's dug in, so it, like the center of it is like hollow or something.
I see it. Yeah, that's really interesting. Why did they do that? Gosh, once you start seeing it, you can't stop.
That's yeah, one reason why that's it drives, ordinary people so crazy, and like we diagnose
Oh
them
yeah.
with schizophrenia and stuff like that, like or like catatonia.
If you're one of those people, you need to stay cool.
Just
The key is to not
chill
get into the
out, dog.
remake.
Catatonic guys are just like, I've been chilling out for 20 years now. Like, what do you want from me?
I wanted to, since we're talking about it, I wanted to talk about. I've alluded to this throughout the episode, but the misinterpretation with Saturn worship and the sacrifices that come with it, um, including but not limited to children in many cases. The idea and the interpretation behind that is that Saturn as an entity devours the past in order to feed the future. Obviously, you cannot go back into the past and change it. One way to create an apparatus um, and pass that price on to somebody else is symbolically childhood stands for innocence and the beginning of life, and it represents our past, which when you become an adult, you have to reconcile. You can never go back to that. There is no reshaping the past. There is coming to peace with it, but there is never offloading the past's burdens to benefit you. There is only changing the present, which will become the past later. That is the only way to benefit your future in a way that is sound and safe for you long term.
So there's a couple more Bible verses I wanted to get into now that you're talking about this, just talking about time in general. I was talking earlier about Father Time clipping Cupid's wings, and there's a pretty pronounced reason why it's Saturn or Death, that's the one that's doing all this, because it's ultimately him that gets his wings cut by God, and he gets cast down by the end. That's whenever Christ is talking about, I have the keys to death and Hades, and I will cast death uh, down into hell. But in Luke 10, he says, Jesus said unto them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and on scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the demons are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. And in Revelation 12, it says, therefore, rejoice, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, and he is filled with fury, because he knows his time is short. He knows he has a material body and he'll die shortly.
Hmm. Very good. It sounds a lot like, how do I phrase this? It seems like you really contextualize Christ's teachings in a way that makes it a sort of antidote, which I'm sure is the intention, to the pain and suffering of life and the earth.
Well, you could argue that's what Christ was trying to do in his life.
Yeah, yeah. There's no doubt. Yeah, it's a lot. I think that we are bound to some pretty harsh laws, um, and we're not really born in the most comfortable of times.
Yeah, whenever you're talking about being born into comfortable times, I mean, these days we have to deal with mass production, mass consumption, and AI, which all feed on electrical and spiritual consumption, which is very Saturnic. And even whenever you look at something as benign as like the Chat GPT logo, you can see how it's designed as a ring. You can see it's designed as an eye, something that is like opening and closing.
See, oh really? I had a conversation about the Chat GPT logo. Um, my girlfriend's gonna watch this and think that you're insane because we just talked about this.
I mean, I already knew
How
that
you
she
can
thought I was
rearrange.
insane, but yeah.
Yeah, because you can rearrange the Chat GPT logo to be a couple of things, really. I'm pretty sure that makes the cube if you
Well,
close that circle.
you can arrange the X logo into a the sigil of Saturn, apparently.
Wow. They really love this, man. They
Yeah,
love this
they're
stuff.
deep into it.
They
Like,
eat it up, man. They think we're insane. Oh my gosh, the black cube is in Chat GPT. You can see it if the
see?
background is black. Yeah. This is what I was saying when I was saying that Saturn is a very complex, very in depth, and hard to articulate in a way that's believable subject.
Yeah, and those who know will be able to parse out the elements that we're trying to parse out here in this episode. I think it'll be understandable to them. But for anyone who has just now started listening for whatever reason, you're definitely gonna have to go back to the to the other episodes before you can
Mhm.
understand uh, what we're trying to get at here.
It's deep, deep, deep in human history. Um, and we were born at a very interesting time.
Very much.
I think this is a good place to end it. What do you think?
You know, I believe so, and we can end it here. We're over an hour, so if you want to send us off with anything,
Well, to summarize, the energy of Saturn has always been a stand in Hermeticism for the physicality of the world and your limits, what you are capable of, which is a bit of a paradox when you think about it, because the path of Hermeticism is about becoming capable of anything. But we have to acknowledge that it's a little impossible to be perfect and to be a perfectly balanced and integrated human being in a world that absolutely demands by its law that you are not. Um, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is the thing that makes us human, and it is the thing that makes it so appealing to the bodhisattva who comes back and enjoys life once again, even though he's already done his time, so to speak. Um,
Well, I don't think he was meant to come back to enjoy his life. He's trying to come back to save everyone like Christ, turn their
I
spirits to gold, right?
and it's both. It's both. There's something whimsical. You have to remember about the bodhisattva. I mean, there are different kinds of bodhisattvas, but many of them
Well, yeah,
are
there's different ways of
said to
doing it,
have
but
yeah, many of them are said to have a twinkle in their eye, a sort of boyish innocence that they show to the world in a very roguish way while they are still doing their job and serving. Um,
I will definitely agree that Christianity um, lost, like itself, it lost a lot of its own immaturity or like childlike nature, or a lot of its whimsical nature. Lost its whimsy.
yeah.
I think it did that through giving so much reverence to God, and I believe the crucifixion of Christ probably left like a just a humbling kind of memory where you're not like joking around about it as much as you
Yeah.
would if you were Buddhist or Hindu or anything like that.
Yeah. Um, Jesus had a very kind and whimsical nature. Although there was something interesting that he never laughed in the scriptures, actually. So you you might have to correct me. You might have to actually delete this whole thing. I might be wrong.
I think Jesus might have been portrayed as happy, optimistic. I don't know about like joking and humorous, but I'm sure he had his
Yeah.
moments in real life that didn't go down in scripture.
Yeah, his disciples certainly did. There's a lot of playful uh, stories between them. But I think ultimately, if you want to see Christ as the antidote, what he stands in for is wisdom and willpower. It is
Willpower over temptation of the material world.
mm, and willpower over being swayed. Mastery doesn't mean perfection. It means mastering your own wisdom, your willpower, and your resolve when standing against the things which, by their nature, do not work in your favor because you live in a very harsh world.
Yes, every soul here is subjected to this harsh world, and how we all die. It all seems, whenever you put it in a very pragmatic, realistic sense, if you think there is no God, death is nothing to joke at, nothing to, you know, make light of. It's just brutal, painful, and tragic.
I wish I had better news for you, but that's Saturn.
Yeah, and that's just like all of the across all traditions. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. The law of nature still applies to you.
That's life.
That's what all the people say.
Can we sing that?
We're flying high in April and
Wait,
shot
we
down
can't
in
sing that.
May.
Wait, we can't sing that. We're gonna get our first copy strike.
I hope.
I think we should end it with that.
All right, great.